Awesome. So let's get straight on the way and talk about foundations and how to serve your community. So why did we do this webinar? Because philanthropy, as I see it, is the way of the future. More and more people's needs are growing. There's a need for like health assistance, spiritual awakening, financial help like never before in what I see the fairly monumental collapse that's happening in the world, civilization-wise, in terms of civil order, social structure, and pretty much in the way of life that people know it. And that can be very destabilizing. And one of the things that I've learned in recent times from a very good psychologist shaman is how indigenous cultures, for example, always have a faith and a structure and a belief beyond themselves and a way of serving, which they can fall back on when their life falls apart. People with a strong religious base are the same. That's why even when I've had challenging times, I've been going through one recently, I've always had my faith and my connection with God, with the universe to fall back on from a very strong faith and religious background. Whereas people who don't have that, when their way of life and what gives safety and stabilization disappears, people go through a fairly major chaotic collapse. So, and I'm sure many of you know exactly what I mean. If you do, just kind of raise your hand. So this is why foundations I see as an important way of the future, and why there's going to become more and more people setting these things up. And there's so many benefits from doing it. So let's just move through this. So I'm going to keep it very simple, very much an overview today. I'm not going to really go into too much detail, just to show you what it's about. And then you will decide for yourself, is this for me? And is this the path for me to go? And, you know, why am I doing this, so to speak? Like, am I doing this for tax reasons only? You know, am I doing this for, you know, some other reason? Because many people today do it for tax reasons, but there's so much more than tax reasons as to why you would do a foundation, as you will see. You know, that's just to kind of really in the scheme of things, a very minor thing. So, but I will briefly cover, obviously, the taxation side and why that's so good. So these are the things we'll be covering. So a bit of a brief history. I'll be discussing these more shortly, but these are very popular ones. You know, you can do churches, education foundation, public benevolent, health promotion, private auxiliary. Other ones are special person, someone disabled, raising money, crowdfunding, school building, school library, this kind of stuff. So charities and foundations have been tax exempt historically for thousands of years, continues to apply to this day in Australia and in many countries of the world. The secret, as I've discovered, I've never met someone who's got really great wealth and who keeps it and who has happiness, who doesn't have philanthropy. I have met the odd person who has great wealth who doesn't do philanthropy, but generally they're less happy people. So many say riches don't make you happy. I personally believe that is true if you don't have greater meaning beyond your wealth, because the more wealth, when you don't have meaning in your life, just simply, you just start using the money for more debauchery, for more like, you know, carnal pleasures, as I would call it, which is all well in balance, but too much of it can actually make you sick. You know, it's like having the occasional treat meal. So I've never met someone truly happy who's making a lot of money who doesn't do fairly significant philanthropy and giving back in the world. So it's a huge way to go, and I hope more people do that. And even the elite, in all their bad kind of carry on, like these particular ones here, the Rockefellers, Bill Gates, Warren Buffett, what many people today have only heard the really horrible stuff about many of these guys, but they don't actually hear some of their foundations. They did do some very genuine work that made a really big difference in places. And the Rockefellers are well known for that, for some of the things they actually did. And sure, they end up using it like unfortunately in a way that's hasn't worked out quite so well, and many of these have. But they certainly worked out that foundations is very much an important part of their mission and having meaning in their life. So it's used for charitable, not-for-profit purposes to help others, and must be not-for-profit. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't make money. It just means that it can't be profit for the personal members of it. It must be mainly to make profit for making a difference. And then the personal members can also benefit within certain limitations. So these are the 4 legal heads of charity given in Pemswell's House of Lords case. Relief of poverty is one. Helping the less fortunate, what I call teach a man to fish, and you do it for life, or give a man a fish for a day and you've got to feed him tomorrow. This is what I call give a man a fish and he'll have to give one tomorrow. This is immediate distress, homeless, food, distress relief. Advancement of religion at churches, things like that, where you're helping make a difference to grow spiritual consciousness. And that's quite broad. Advancement of education, that's the opposite to the first one. That one you can actually, is more about teach a man to fish and you got him for life kind of foundation, and just about anything else apart from what I've just said. So in terms of the features and benefits and why you would do it, 5 main reasons really. I mean, one is tax exemptions. It's not really the number one reason, certainly not the number one reason that I do it. So probably not quite correct to put it number one, but that's certainly a big factor. And the reason that tax exemptions are given is because the government see it as useful to reward people who are doing this, because it frees them up from doing social services to help the less fortunate and do this kind of stuff. So it's given because it rewards people like government grants who are doing something to make the government's life easy. Because we've seen firsthand governments are not particularly great at running businesses. So any kind of project really. So the main thing to understand with the tax exemptions is there's 2 types. Foundation itself is always tax exempt, but the individual as such, it depends on the foundation. Generally not so much. They only get certain limitations. They do get some relief, you know, they get some like what's called rebatable benefits, where I think up to $30,000 for employees or for yourselves. Only pastors of a genuine church get full individual tax relief. So that's kind of the best way to understand how it works. So foundations are really, really great, and they're quite wonderful, and definitely something that it's great for people to do that. So foundations are, like I said, a wonderful thing. It's something I'm very passionate about myself, and really making a pretty significant difference. And I get very excited when I have clients working with me, and my aim is to probably move more that kind of path. Another one is asset protection. I mean, it's a great structure. You got assets in there, you're pretty much difficult to sue you. Power to extend your blessings to help others. That's number 3. This is the big one and probably the most important. And in fact, I'm probably just going to rearrange my slides on this one, because I do think for me, if this isn't your primary goal, there isn't really any purpose in doing it. So it's where you've freely given or you've made something. And I've got, for example, many clients I'm working with foundations. I've got one who's doing amazing work in Kenya. You know, it's kind of cool. I've got another one doing an animal welfare shelter, another one a mental health promotion center. I've got another one with an education foundation to be aware of the World Economic Forum agenda and things like that, and COVID and what's coming next. I've got another client who got quite a few run churches. So there's plenty of foundations that I had the privilege of setting up. So yeah, so I'm going to actually make that the number 1, because I think that's probably the more honest truth. So I've just changed the slides as we're talking. That's number 2. Number 3. Number 4 is it's much less regulation than normal structures, and people are always delighted and find it hard to get used to. And number 5, public relations. It just makes you look good. People like people who give back. You get government grants. As an example, churches now and certain other foundations have been given a $10,000 a month free advertising grant by Google, you know? So that's just an example of what happens to foundations. Or governments will give you land and things like that. One of my guys I know, he was talking about a billionaire who went to Nicaragua to help with a school, and the government offered him $100 million worth of land because they said, yeah, you clearly know what you're doing and we don't. So that's the kind of thing that happens with foundations. So in terms of the types of foundations, Churches is one, as I've mentioned. And don't misunderstand this. Many churches that I've set up for clients, including my own, is mainly online. My church is only now deciding to move into the physical more. We were in the physical previously, but we moved online on intuition, and then COVID happened. And so, of course, it was good that we did. But church can be online, offline. It's really quite broad. All you have to do is basically show belief in a supernatural being. That's pretty much it. And you've got a clear canon of beliefs and conduct. It's incredibly broad, and people are always shocked as to what qualifies as a church. You know, any kind of spiritual healing or spiritual teaching or spiritual kind of work of any kind, it's pretty much that's the way. I've had a Wiccan church set up, had a Taoist church, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Hindu. I've had even a universal God kind of one set up. There was even one in America where they set up a cannabis church, for example. So things like that. Public benevolent institutes, that's where you help the less fortunate. You can get tax deductibility, so that's if you're giving things away to really help people in need. This is where you're specifically bringing awareness about a disease, like let's say you want to not just so much give things away to people, but you want to really help people be aware and teach them, like for mental health and stuff like that, or physical health or some kind of unusual disease. An education foundation is another one, where you educate people. And the final one is a private auxiliary foundation. And this is where you basically put money into a foundation, tax deductible, to, basically build up assets and build up wealth and things like that. So to give money away. And it's very good for people who don't really want to get hands-on like the other four are, and just want to give money away to other places to do the work. So this way you can effectively build certain amounts of wealth tax-free and then just give it away. So, and of course, another one, so that's basically a public benevolent institution. So there's all kinds of different foundations that you can do, which all work pretty well, which I've shown you here. And yeah, there's really so many different ways that you can set up a foundation and things like that. And in terms of other types of foundations, I mean, I've shown them to you previously, but they are the main five for all intensive purposes. I've never really set anything else up. There are two types of foundations, public or private. I mean, I don't particularly like private myself, just because, well, they don't really do much in Australia. I mean, they're fine if you want them, but they certainly don't get recognised by the tax office. They don't get recognised for government grants and things like that. We're not taken as seriously. So really, people mainly set them up just for tax purposes. And yes, and the ATO have made it very clear they're going to go after that kind of stuff. So I'm very simple. Get a public registered foundation if you want to do it. If you just want to own a foundation, just own some assets in it, that's fine, a private one. But really, they don't do much else than a bit of asset protection in Australia anyway. So we do have stuff on that on our Global Wealth Club site if you are interested. So the question next is where to set up. I mean, I mainly deal with Australian. I do have somebody else, for example, who does offshore, Stephen Pettit. I'm more focused on Australian foundations. Offshore don't really work. They work very well for but for asset protection purposes and international philanthropy. Keep in mind, Australian foundations, with the only exception being overseas aid funds, is the only one which is allowed to function overseas. And that's kind of a bit more difficult to set up, so to speak. So overseas aid funds are a little bit more difficult to set up. So I did actually forget to mention that one. So the overseas aid fund. So that one basically is where, like, this particular client wants to help people in Kenya, as an example. So that hopefully explains everything to you with that. Offshore, there's all places like Panama, Seychelles, Cook Islands. These are all very popular places to set one up. And you can always watch this on our site to find out more. So these are a very good foundation for people to set up, the offshore foundation, so to speak. So, but again, this is mainly for people who want to build international wealth and hold for asset protection. Don't really do much in Australia other than that. There's a number of different structures, which I won't really go into, but just so you know, it all comes down. The first two are the most popular by far. The number 3rd, 4th, and 5th are more specific. Like number 3 is more specific for incorporated or unincorporated. Very popular, but not recommended by me. They're popular if your foundation is more state-based and probably a bit cheaper and less regulated. I don't like doing them for Australia-wide because then you've got state government regulation as well, and you've got double regulation. So generally it's 1 or 2, and it would depend on which one you do. Each have got pros and cons. I tend to do a combination of the 2. So that really is the simple overview of foundation. So let's just take, so that kind of summarizes it. So in summary, let me go through and explain how foundations basically work. So foundations really are designed, so let's just kind of go back and remind ourselves as to why we do the foundations and what the benefits of doing them. So the 5 main benefits for doing foundations: power to extend your financial blessings to help others. Tax exemptions is number 2. That's a big one. Number 3 is protecting your assets. Number 4 is less government regulation. And number 5 is really good PR and things like government grants. So they're the main reasons that you do it. So all the different types of foundations I've mentioned, we've covered churches, public benevolence, health promotion, education, private auxiliary, overseas aid fund, which is a very popular one. So for people who want to go, this one's a lot more involved with approvals, and there's all kinds of other different types. So that's really how foundations work, so to speak. I've mentioned I'm not really a big fan of private foundations. I prefer public foundations. So really now, my next question is, I've gone very, very quickly and very efficiently today because I really wanted to open up. I wasn't quite sure who would be on here and what you're looking for. So please start asking your questions. What would you like me to share out a little bit more? And the other reason too is you can actually purchase our live event, The Sovereign Individual, where I teach a whole section on foundations in detail. So there's really no point being a parrot and repeating it. So this is just a bit of a sneak preview for you, and you can ask your questions. And then if you're interested, you can either book in for an appointment, or to get more education, you can buy our event for a relatively low price. So please start asking your questions. Is there a difference between a foundation and what? Sorry, Isabella, I can't see anything else. If you have a foundation, can you take a salary from it? You certainly can. And with most foundations, you can get up to $30,000 tax-free rebatable benefits, which means tax-free. Animal rescue charity, that's a really good one. Probably more that's probably more an other type of foundation. That's probably more an other particular type. So it falls within that other category I mentioned. It's and probably more falls within the other purposes for the community, because animals, there's been court cases saying that animals and humans are very different. How does a community association differ from a private foundation? Well, I don't really do much private foundations, Graham, but as I mentioned, community associations are more very much designed for specific purposes like farmers community or local Rotary Club or things like that. Lisa asked, is there a certain amount of money you have to set to start up a foundation and the approximate cost? Yeah, to do one properly and get like a public approval and all that, it's a big job and you need a lot of support. I generally tell people allow about, 25, 30 grand by the time you've finished, because it's going to take a bit of work to set it up, get it approved, and then get on top of how it's managed. But yeah, best decision you'll ever make in your life. That's my observation. When starting an auxiliary foundation, Australia stopped me from leaving Australia as a tax resident. Not necessarily. If you meet all the other requirements, Matt. So not necessarily, not at all. Mick and Jamie, can you run a business out of a foundation? Yes, you can. What's the case? The Word Investments case in the High Court in 2006 confirmed that you could run a business out of a foundation, provided that the monies were used for higher charitable purposes. That was the main thing. So provided it was used for the purposes of the foundation, it was a Christian ministry that was selling a lot of products, which they said that provided they're using it to promote their Christianity, that's fine. Marty, what is a charitable trust and why would you set up a foundation and not a trust? Well, it's the same thing, Marty. A charitable trust is just one of 5 types of ways you can set up a foundation, that's all. So I'm just taking you back to that slide before. Yeah, these are all different types of foundations. So that's the best way to understand it. Lisa, can you receive a grant to start a foundation? Oh, I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. I think so, yes, but I've never been involved in that. How do you get money into a foundation besides contributions and donations? You do it through, if you've got a family trust with, and your trustee recognizes registered charities, you can distribute straight to the registered charity. How is personal wealth created from running a foundation? Well, that's the whole nature. You're giving up the wealth, but you're building a legacy. So you own it, but don't control it. So the wealthy eventually realize that when you pass over, you pass over with nothing. So if you're more about personal wealth, which you want to keep complete control of, your foundation is not for you. Ray, where do I start and need to know to start a foundation? Looking at education. Yeah, look, Ray, the best thing to do is you can either, number 1, purchase our sovereign individual event that we did previously. That's got a section which I've done on that. Number 2 is I'll be explaining at the end how you can actually book in for a consultation, which basically with me, and that's basically a paid one, but you get a free. So first you book in for a free one with Grace or one of the team, and from there, a paid consultation with me. And I generally do a 2970 package, which just really just sets the scene and makes sure it's appropriate for you. I keep it relatively good and within a reasonable, price. And then if you go ahead, we rebate the 2970 against whatever the foundation ends up costing. So that's the best way to understand it. Sarah, with regards to church foundations that promote spirituality, as opposed to ones that promote a particular religion where priests or rabbis lead them, how does one become a pastor to head your own spiritual foundation? Very easily. It's the easiest foundation to set up. You just got to set up your own creed, your own rules, and you can make yourself a pastor pretty much. If you've got a particular religion, and generally it's pretty broad, Sarah. So pretty broad. So do you know the structure that Bill and Melinda Gates have set up? No, I don't. It would be an American one. What happens if at some point you no longer want to run the foundation? Can you close it? You just pass it on to new trustees. If you close it, you have to give all the money away anyway. So it's not. So just keep in mind that you can't just take the money out. You have to give it all away. And in terms of what assets can be protected by a foundation, anything that you buy in that, but you're happy to be owned by the foundation. Sue Lynn, the minimum amount set aside. Yeah, I don't. Should one set aside to maintain a foundation or ongoing? Hard to know, you know. There's no tax returns required, but you do have BASs and a few other things, so financials. So it's not that expensive. It's much less expensive than having a company or a trust. Is there a difference between a foundation and public charity? No, there is not. A public charity is simply just a foundation registered in the public arena. And yes, it's a great way to go. And like I said, the benefits are massive, massive, massive. And it's one of the least regulated areas. So just whizzing on back to what we put previously about the 5 main benefits, I mean, they're pretty big. As well as the fact you do a lot of good, the tax exemptions are pretty damn good for foundations. And you get great asset protection. And my experience is that people with wealth are generally doing a lot of good anyway. They're just not being rewarded from it. I had a client who was running a church for a company once. Literally, I had another client who lives over in South Australia who was making a lot of money, and yeah, he was doing huge philanthropy, but not tax effective. So, and there's miles less government regulation compared to other structures, and even in audits, they get treated a lot better. But less about punishment, as about educating you. And PR. Someone asked about, did I answer about wages? Yes, I did. You can take wages. Generally, you can only do up to $30,000 tax-free, and it depends on the foundation and what you're doing. Okay, so let's just kind of, who's enjoyed the quicker, more efficient format today? I'm curious. Who's enjoyed? Raise your hand if you really enjoyed the quicker, quite efficient Q&A format. Awesome. Lots of people. So the last 2 questions I'll answer here. By using a company structure, it will involve the director's ID? Yes, it will. If you had a spiritual church and you bought land to have this church and events on, can you protect your property? Those certainly you can. Absolutely, yes. There's a very good way to do it, Lisa. So where to from here? Now that you listen to it, I mean, you can either purchase a sovereign individual event, and if you want to do that, email our support. The team will put the support email in here. So otherwise, if you really think already like, hey, I think this could be right for me, have a free chat with one of our team. Grace will have it initially. And if you feel it's suitable, you can book in for a 2970 one-off consult with me and on that particular one. So we'll find the best possible solutions. Just keep in mind that we're really about this. We don't do anything dodgy tax. We certainly help you legally minimize your tax magnificently, but this is the #1 thing we want to make sure that you're doing if we do this for you. And yes, you can have more than one foundation, but it's a lot of work. Okay, so final. Just type in the chat who's basically very interested, or who's definitely going to interested in buying a sovereign individual package to learn more about it, or actually booking in for a free consult. Just raise your hand if you're like, yep, this is right within my ballpark. Yep, great, quite a few. So strongly suggest. Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone. I will see you next time. Bye for now. So sorry, just go to the Global Wealth Club site. And as I mentioned, you will actually just simply book in for the free consult on that part there. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy your night.